Hello, good morning. Welcome to the morning program, The Dailies. Today being the 30th of August 2024. And we're really happy to see another wonderful day like this. Here in the city of Jos, it's quite rainy and cold, so do well to keep warm and as well avoid the rain getting damp or as a result of, walking under the rain, your shoes and all that. I'm Stella Elisha Dasham and we'll be looking at some of the stories on the front page of the paper. So do well to drop your comment and your views concerning any of it. And I will be doing it with Rachel Tansey. Good morning.
Morning, sir.
All right, we will be going through the papers and I will start with the first paper, which is the First News newspaper. The Tigers make history as first African team to break into FIBA top 10. You can do well to get detail of that story in the paper. Tinubu embarks on diplomatic mission to China. As well, flood fears, Anambra activate 27 IDP camps, as we're seeing that a number of states are doing all that they can. We will recall yesterday NEMA was warning concerning the fact that the flood will actually take over about 28 states, so the government need to do something as well. Federal government berates striking doctors, threatens no work, no pay. Man jailed 9 months for stealing 2 tubers of yam. You can do well to read detail of that. As well, SEC opened doors for 2 crypto exchanges. You can read more detail on that story. The big story here says reports reveal alarming toll of terrorism kidnapping in Nigeria. 55,910 killed, 21,000 abducted in 4 years, with a rider 1.04 billion naira paid to kidnappers as ransom in 1 year. And as well, we have court dismisses suit against the hashtag End Bad Governance protesters. And we have federal government hands traders 1 month to crash prices of food. You can read detail in the paper. Then we have a picture story here. The president receiving a letter of credency from the High Commissioner of the Republic of Ghana. Vice Ad Marshal set at the presidential villa in Abuja yesterday. And that's all the First News newspaper.
On the Nation newspaper, manufacturing gets 74 billion naira to boost production. DBN releases 112 billion naira loans. Sheyi Tinubu launches initiative to fight maternal and infant mortality. Canada bans visiting visa holders from work permit. Rule of law must serve all, says NBA president. You can find details of the Canadian visa ban on page 4 and that of the rule of law from the NBA on page 2. Police quiz Ajero over NLC terror suspect tenant. President off to China. Details can be found on page 2. Striking doctors risks losing pay. Federal government threatens to involve no work, no pay rule. You can start with the details on the front page. The big story on the paper, 50% electricity subsidy for facilities and teaching hospitals. President has given approval, says minister. Consumer Commission moves against arbitrary price fixing. FCCPC CEO Tunji Bello enforcement begins September. $1 million fraud. EFCC nabbed suspected 4-man syndicate impersonating Olukayede. Details can be found on page 26, and that's all the news on the Nation newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, talking about living in Abuja, the making of a capital city of gross inequality, rags and riches, where we can see the picture story showing concerning the issue of housing. And this is what is happening here, the fact that a number of residents in Abuja especially are actually homeless because of the issue of insecurity, rapid urbanization, and then lack of affordable housing. So this has actually put a number of people living in uncompleted buildings. And remember the issue where the FCT minister was trying to demolish some of the shanties that are actually, residing there in Abuja. So a number of people cannot afford housing, especially in the FCT, and then a number of things are happening. So you can do well to get the paper and read more detail, especially for those who are living around there, and see if there's a way out for you to have an affordable housing there in FCT. Still on the Guardian newspaper, federal government gives traders 1 month to crash prices of goods. You can read that on page 30. Government increases SUBI matching grants to 3.5 billion naira, talking about the universal basic education. You can read detail of that on page 7. Efe Babalola caution against 18 years limit for WAEC and NECO. You can read that as well in the paper. EKEDC explained disconnection of UNILAC after 180 million naira payment. Foreign inflow down by 57.22% as investors appraises portfolio. Over 55,910 civilians killed in Nigeria in 4 years, says the report. As well, Ajero vows to fight on, says police invitation mere distraction to labor struggles. And concerning doctor strike, federal government threatening to invoke no work, no pay rule. You can read detail of that on page 3, and that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On Nigerian Tribune, Efe Babalola faults federal government stance on 18-year limit for varsity admission, says policy against university autonomy. Federal government approves 50% electricity subsidy for public hospitals. The big story on the paper, federal government gives traders 1 month to crash prices. FCCPC meets stakeholders, explains why 30 days moratorium was given. Cites law empowering it to act. Decries prohibitive prices of goods in supermarkets. Stakeholders blame insecurity, multiple taxation, high cost of transportation for high prices. Details can be found on page 6. Reps petition Canadian envoy over genocide inciting statement. Court strikes out suit against #end bad governance protesters. Aviation Minister signs memorandum of understanding with Boeing to boost the sector. On local government autonomy, NBA names committee to monitor 774 councils to ensure implementation of Supreme Court judgment. Details can be found on page 2. In Edo, political parties candidate to sign peace accord September 12. APC PDP in war of words over plot to rig election. And that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On this day newspaper, Luke Poperi moves to resolve issues with domestic crude oil supply, engages producers. Say Nigeria winning war against oil theft and sabotage. You can read detail in the paper. Aircraft acquisition, Kiamo signed memorandum of understanding with Boeing to aid Nigerian carriers. You can read that on page 9. And here we have the picture story here, various cross-section of bankers committee completing the restoration of National Theatre. So you can get the paper and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On Blueprint newspaper, troops neutralized 1,166, arrested 1,096 suspects in August, a report from the Defense Headquarters. Blueprint loses head agri-dex John Oba. SEC approves Kudax Busa as crypto exchanges. More details can be found on page 21. In sports, Paris 2024 federal government probes claims of unpaid allowances to the Tigress. The big story on the paper, crash food prices in 1 month of face sanction, federal government warns retailers. The writer says import charges, high bank interest, rate increment, our challenge. And these are traders replying back to the federal government the reasons why they might not be able to crash the food prices within the short period of time. Let's protect NNPCL as our national asset. Soneye urges media lose blueprint on objectivity. You can start with the details on the front page. On Edo Guba, parties to sign peace accord September 12. IPAC urges neutrality. Ganduje threatens ENSIEC with lawsuit over Enugu APC factions. Tinubu urges Nigeria-Brazil collaboration on aviation. 500 billion naira TED fund varsity intervention in CBN unassessed, coming from reps. Police didn't question Ajero on terrorism or treason. Lawyer is saying so. The last story on the paper, 4 suspects arrested over use of EFCC chair's name to extort $1 million. Details can be found on page 6, and that's all news on Blueprint newspaper.
On New Telegraph newspaper, we will be seeing CBN report puts debt service cost of $2.78 billion in 7 months. Nigeria carrier, federal government Boeing signed aircraft acquisition pact, detailed on page 7. Coming from Abia State, Kalu Ford Otis claim on Aruchukwu Onifa Road project. You can do well to read that on page 3. Nigeria won't get things right without experienced people in power, coming from Shekaru. And we have Canada end policy allowing visitor visa holders to apply for work permit, and that is why we're seeing that a number of people are sharing that they might be deported as a result of this new immigration policy. So do well to read that in case your ward or any of your law firm will be affected, and what is the next way forward. Coming from the IMF, more women leading record number of central banks, detailed on page 25. The big story striking doctors. We will invoke no work, no pay, says the federal government. Reiterates it's been working with NSA orders to ensure immediate safe rescue of Dr. Popular, to provide 50% electricity subsidy for public hospitals, varsities, and others. And if you recall, Rachel, when we were discussing this particular issue, I said I believe that the strike is not just because of the abduction of the doctor, but because there were other issues underlining on the. And here we're seeing that the federal government is saying that they have actually said they'll start paying 50% of electricity subsidy for them. And then I'm looking forward to what the government is going to do as well concerning other things. Apart from electricity, the other pending issues we are aware that is happening in the health sector that need immediate attention. Apart from the security of the health workers, we're looking at the health workers leaving the shores of Nigeria. We're looking at infrastructure. We're looking at equipment that are needed, and so many other things that are actually more like a restructuring entirely in the health sector. I think that's what is needed. And here they have a threat. No work, no pay. And we saw there was this threat as well when ASU went on strike during the Buhari's regime, when he said no work, no pay, and then it took a while before they got their arrears and their payment and all of that. But let us see how far this can go, and we hope that they will come to an understanding. We hope the doctor that has been abducted, she will be rescued, and then other things will fall in place as soon as possible.
So it's very insensitive for the government to say no work, no pay. These doctors have been working without certain allowances, without their hazard allowances. They've been working without certain pay increase and upgrade. And when they decide to strike, you threaten them that no work, no pay. It's very insensitive for the government to do such a thing for any union whatsoever, because whether we like it or not, we have our workers working and not seeing certain allowances, not seeing certain benefits coming their way that is expected for years, and they've been working. So when they decide to say you must listen to us, and then you threaten them with no pay, no work, no pay, it's very insensitive coming from the government. And we can even look at the things, the struggles that these doctors are going through. We see the brain drain is as a result of less hand. So it's almost like how am I, a doctor, having thousands compared to just having 600 as patients? I'm having thousands of patients. I'm already working double. You understand? So it means that if my pay, for example, is 100,000 a month to see 600 patients, let's put it that way. If I am seeing double that number, my pay should be double. For the work, that's what it means. If we're
for that.
Exactly, if we're going to be honest. And yet when they go on a strike, you threaten them. It's insensitive of the government to do such things. At the same time, it's also important for our doctors to also, you know what, this strike is at a very crucial period of time. We already don't have enough doctors in the hospitals. It will be insensitive for me to ask them to hold a little longer, but it's important. This is where we just need to understand each other.
True.
In this country. It's quite unfortunate that we get to that kind of point, but I just hope that they pass their message and they come back to work. And then most importantly, let the government do whatever it takes to release this doctor and put other things in place. Is 50% of electricity bill a good start? Yes, it is. But is there more that needs to be done? We just hope to see those things being put in place by the government.
So we look forward to seeing what step the federal government will take regarding that. Still a New Telegraph newspaper, Ajero to police. We have the NLC can't be intimidated. We have nothing to hide. You can read that on page 4. And kidnappers collected 1.048 billion naira ransom in 1 year. This is a report talking about the fact that terrorism will end day Nigerians say no to it, coming from the defense headquarters. And Kaduna here is saying soldiers engage bandits in gun battle, kill 8. And you begin to wonder, we keep enriching terrorism, and what is the way forward? If the defense headquarters saying terrorism will end the day Nigerians say so to be, then we just have to look forward to seeing what is the government doing regarding that, because the ball is in their court. Tinubu leaves for China on an official visit. You can read that on page 4. We have a study that links greater alcohol intake to growth risks. You can do well to read that on page 28 for those who are fond of taking alcohol. And that's all in New Telegraph newspaper.
On Vanguard newspaper, why cement prices are high, statement from the BUA boss. Coronation anniversary, that I'm king doesn't mean everything I was before I was crowned is thrown away. Details can be found on page 14. Alleged terrorism financing, what NLC president told police. Find details on page 8. Federal government will liaise with EU to take action against Simon Ekpa. Information from the defense headquarters. The big story on the paper, exploitative pricing. Traders get 1 month notice to crash prices. The writer says it can lead to scarcity, business closure, job losses, stakeholders react. Price reduction a mirage unless insecurity, high transportation costs are reduced. A statement from TUC. Rising cost of food items, Catholic bishop tax federal government on security of farmers. Still on the paper, tension in Kebbi as military personnel shoots DPO dead. On insecurity, 55,910 dead, 21,000 abducted in 4 years. On sports, Oshime's Chelsea transfer deal nearing conclusion. And then we have a picture where we can see at the launch of accelerated bird registration project, where we can see from left to right UNICEF country representative Ms. Christiana and Chairman National Population Commission Mr. Nasir, alongside the First Lady of Nigeria, Senator Luremi Tinubu, carrying one of the babies and the mother, giving the certificate. And that's all the news on Vanguard newspaper.
On the Daily Times newspaper, warning strike, we will invoke no work, no pay policy, federal government tells the NARD. Talking about the National Association of Resident Doctors. You can do well to read detail of that story in the paper. Tinubu calls for strengthening collaboration between Nigeria and Brazil on aviation. Concerning inflation, FCCPC gives Nigerian traders 1 month to slash prices or face penalties. NIMED DJ Hamza Adedeji orders honored as honoring fellows of the CRMI. You can do well to read that on page 9. The big story, NLC can be intimidated, says Ajero after police interrogation, which we will recall. Yesterday, he was there to write his statement, and in between 1 hour, he was done and he left. So more interrogation will be going on. You can read that with the writer here saying NLC remains committed to defending the rights of Nigerian workers. Real reason why police invited NLC president emerges. So we'll look forward to seeing the reasons. You read detail in the paper. Troops neutralized 1,166 terrorists, arrested 1,096 suspected terrorists in August. A report from the defense headquarters. Diminished capabilities of terror groups to engage in major offensive. Downside of the paper, we no longer eat 3 square meals, Kaduna resident lament, and this is not just in Kaduna but everywhere. We're seeing that about 31 million Nigerians are going through acute hunger. So you could really tell that a number of people cannot afford to have 3 square meals. You can do well to read detail of that. We have the picture story here. Do well to get the paper and read more detail of stories of interest to you.
On Daily Sun newspaper, federal government policies strangulating impoverishing, says Catholic bishops, demand end to multiple taxation and food insecurity. FCCPC gives traders 1 month to crash prices. Electricity tariff, federal government approves 50% subsidy for public hospitals. Governor Mba inaugurates minimum wage implementation committee, commissions Asplat plant. More details can be found on page 27. NLC President Ajero Quist says labor movement worth dying for. Details of this statement can be found on page 6. And we have Bankers Committee completes restoration of National Theatre. And we have pictures showing the finished project. And that's all the news on Daily Sun newspaper.
I like the fact that more governors are joining the setting of committee regarding the minimum wage. Initially, people were expressing fears that, just very few governors have actually started paying, and very few as well. I think so far we've not heard up to 10 that have set up a committee yet regarding that. So I love the body language coming from few of our governors, and I'm looking forward to seeing more governors joining. Of course, we've had a number of governors saying they can't pay that amount, but if they should check really, they can afford to pay that amount. That is what I believe. Even though it might mean that for some states they have to go into having supplementary budget just so that they'll be able to pay it. But if you look at what is happening, Nigerians deserve more than that. Of course, we saw on Wednesday or so where we saw the demands coming from organizers of the protest, the hashtag End Bad Governance, where they said it's either the government meet up those demands or we have another protest coming up in October, and that will not be a very good one, looking at the fact that on that day is when we are celebrating our independence as a nation, as well as the eyes of the entire world will be on us. So this will not be a very good one if we have another protest erupting on that same day. So I hope more governors will really show the commitment to their people by setting up that committee and let us see the payment. Even though 70,000 is not much, but I think for the meantime Nigerians can do with what they have, and then depending on where we'll see an improvement coming from our various state governors and the federal government as a whole.
It will be the governors rather of every state going to their drawing board and saying, you know what, where is our starting point and where can we start from? First of all, there need to be an increase. There need to be a pay raise in every state, with or without a minimum wage of 30,000 naira. Before now, that is 70. It's expected that should happen with inflation, with the economic challenges and all of that. There should be a pay raise. And this is where I'm expecting to see governors that truly care do something about it. Even if at the moment you cannot implement 70,000 as minimum wage, while you are working towards that, while you are working on improving your revenue, while you are working to see what can be done in the state, how to gather these funds to be able to pay 70,000 naira minimum wage, is expected that there is a pay raise at every level, from the state level down to the local government level in every state. I believe that this should be the move by our governors, and this is the only way we will be able to know that, you know what, there is a government that cares at the state level, regardless of the ability or what power they have regarding the funds to help the people, the workers in that state. So that is the starting point for every state. You might not be able to raise a committee because when you put in a committee, it has to be that 70 and thousand. You can't raise a committee and the committee is talking about 50,000, 40,000. No, it's not acceptable. You'll be violating a law and a policy concerning minimum wage in the country. But then you sit down and see, how are we going to go about improving the lives of people in this country, looking at in this state, looking at inflation and all of that. Any state government that is going to do that, when they are not able to implement 70,000, I think that governor will have a thumbs up, the support of his people, and then eventually they will head towards being able to pay 70,000 minimum wage.
You know, we've been laying so much emphasis and so much of the pressure on our governors. I'm yet to hear what our private bodies are doing.
They are still pointing at the government.
Yes, it's just been pointing at the government, and it's quite sad that we have private institutions that are not even making an attempt whatsoever. And you begin to wonder that as a private, do you have an organization that you can fall back on if the whole body itself is not even making an effort? So when your pay is not being raised, who do you run back to say that this is what is happening?
Yeah.
So we look forward to also seeing private institutions doing something, private organization looking up to what can we do as well. Just like you said, a committee might look that it must be 70, but what are you doing to make sure that, your workers are well taken care of? Because this is where we see exploitation taking place, especially in our private organizations. Well, Rachel, we hope to see better there.
We hope so.
Well, before we continue with the paper review, I would love us to take a break at this moment, just to get a feel of what the papers are saying, looking at yesterday Ajero being with the police, saying that they will not back out, they will not be afraid, and they will not be intimidated by the police. As well, we're seeing that president is out to China, as well as we're seeing a collaboration with Brazil concerning aviation sector, and then we're looking at a warning to traders to slash prices of goods in the next 1 month or face penalty. So we just hope to hear your own views concerning any of the story. When we come back, we will continue the paper review. Please stay tuned with us.
Make your everyday informative, make your everyday count. Know your world, daily affairs, national and international, with authentic news events as they unfold on Global News and Zoom on Nigeria, Monday to Friday at 1 p.m.
Thank you for staying tuned. It's still the Dailies. We have been looking at a number of stories on our papers, which we will love you to be part of by dropping your comment and your views, ranging from the invitation of the NLC president to the police, where he ushered the invitation yesterday by writing his statement. As well, we're seeing the issue of flooding in many states, where we're seeing various states are looking at evacuating residents and getting them to camps where they can reside for the meantime. We also have a president out of the country to China and many other stories on the paper, which we would love you to get engaged in by dropping your comment and your views. I still have Rachel with me. Thank you so much,
You're
Rachel.
welcome, Sarah.
All right, let's take a look at the Daily News Hub newspaper with a story here. My PA was murdered. 3 relatives still in DSS custody. IPOB lawyer tells the new DSS boss. You do well to read that in the paper. Alleged terrorism financing, what police told NLC president Ajero during greeting. NLC president said labor worth dying for, and we can see the picture story showing the Nigerian Labour Congress president surrounded by his lawyers and others while leaving the headquarters of the police yesterday. You can do well to read detail of that. PDP Edo governor in panic, Moldova Edo security network. DPO gunned down at military checkpoint in Zamfara state. Exploitation, federal government gives traders 1 month to crash prices. And we have Afam Osegwe sworn in as the new NBA president. You can do well to read that in the paper. Akwa Ibom Police Commissioner Wehi Ayilaye dies in Lagos. ASU resolves to proceed on strike action at the NDU. We will recall that they are supposed to resume talks again with the federal government next month. So we'll keep our fingers crossed to see what that talk will be all about. I can't be deported. Canadian Nigerian woman threatening Yoruba Bini people with poison boost. Well, let's see what the Canadian government as well as Nigerian government have to say concerning that. Champions League draw confirmed. Look at the full fixture inside the paper. As well, federal government invokes no work, no pay policy against striking resident doctors. And the last story says Tinubu departs for China on an official visit. And that's all on Daily News Hub newspaper.
On Nigerian News Direct, traders frustrating economic stability with exploitative pricing. FCCPC is alleging issues 1-month moratorium for traders to desist from act. Era of darkness has come to end in Osun, says Governor Adeleke. Flags off construction of 33 kV feeders line 11 years abandoned project. Under 2024, transport workers endorsed Governor Aiyedatiwa. Nigeria to host African Data Protection Conference in 2025. Nigeria to host Africa Data Protection Conference in 2025. You can find details on page 5. UBA Business Series, experts profile keys for building sustainable businesses. On election, APC will reclaim Edo, expand in Southeast, capture all 36 states. Ganduye is assuring us. Details can be found on page 3. NDLEA intercepts 60 bags of cannabis in Lagos, promotes officers for successful waterways operation. And that's all the news on Nigeria News Direct.
All right, let's take a look at the Daily Independent newspaper. Looking at Edo Guber, INEC concern over parties' non-compliance to electoral process, and that's why we had that peace accord. We hope that all parties involved will actually adhere and listen to what the peace accord is all about. Do well to read it in the paper. We can't be intimidated, NLC president boasts after leaving the police facility. The big story, federal government plans crackdown on businesses fixing and hiking prices of goods. Give Market Association transporters 1 month to crash prices. One individual's corporate face substantial fines and imprisonment. You can do well to read detail of that in the paper. Osagwe sworn in as NBA president vows to tackle justice failures. Federal government okays 50% electricity subsidy for public hospital. Beg resident doctors to call off 7-day warning strike. Tinubu pushes for direct flights between Nigeria and Brazil. Depart for China on an official visit. As well, EFCC arrests syndicate impersonating Olukayode in $1 million fraud. EFCC arrests syndicate impersonating Olukayode in $1 million fraud. Details found on page 6. New DSS boss assures on working with stakeholders for security solution. Coming from the minister, we will do everything to avert looming ASU strike. Varsities will have gone under if not for TED fund. This is coming from ASU, which a number of people believe it to be true because you go to our schools to see buses by TED fund, classes by TED fund, and all of that. So you do well to look into that and read detail of that as well. UBA Business Series, expert leads innovation, persistent assessment for lasting businesses, which you can read on page 6. And we have a picture story here where we can see the governor of Enugu State when he was trying to, during the launching, which of, I think, power plants. You can do well to get the paper and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On the Matrix newspaper, Aradel completes Olo West Marginal's failed accusation in $19.5 million deal. Cristiano Ronaldo, Gigi Buffon honored at 2024 UEFA Champions League draw. On inflation, federal government moves against price exploitation, gives traders 1 month to crash prices of food items. Traders kick blame multiple taxation, rent, electricity increase, and high transportation costs. Federal government Boeing signed memorandum of understanding to boost local airlines, aircraft acquisition capacity, provide technical support. Edo inaugurates new NSIA board, appoints ex-Airtel CEO Ogunsanya as chair. Details can be found on page 3. The big story on the paper, terrorism financing allegation. We will not be intimidated, a statement from Ajero. Vows to continue struggling for implementation of new minimum wage, says labor movement worth dying for because of patriotism and commitment. Federal government striking doctors, showdown looms over no work, no pay policy. Bilateral economic issues top agenda as Tinubu jets out to China on official visit. Bankers Committee completes renovation of National Theatre. Articles 2027 Faith, You Are Not God. Timmy Frank tells Bode George. Details can be found on page 5. And we have an entertainment story. Mercy Ebe hails Adeniyi Johnson's role in her movie project. Details can be found on page 19. Also a picture story, annual general meeting of BUA Cement. And that's all the news on the Matrix newspaper.
Leadership newspaper, Nigeria accept crypto grant to operators interim approvals. Detailed on page 26. $1 million fraud, EFCC arrests syndicate impersonating Olukayode. Detail found on page 17. The big story here say alleged terrorism financing. Labour talks tough after Ajero's visit to police. Says we won't be intimidated. External pressure behind my travel. This is coming from the NLC president. As well, we see public hospitals to get 50% electricity subsidy. Kwara Governor begs Saldana for Ilori title. You can read detail of that on page 17. As well, we have Syrian Commission invite cleric over gay meeting. 1,166 terrorists killed. 721 hostages rescued in August alone. This is a report coming from the Defense Headquarters. You can find those stories on page 7 and 6. We have the picture story where we can see the former First Lady talking about their patients together with our former head of state, Abdul Salami, and others committee during the Defense Headquarters Annual General Conference in Abuja yesterday. And that's all on the Friday Leadership newspaper.
On Sporting Sun newspaper, Nottingham Forest boss reacts to Owoniyi's penalty miss. Ahead of AFCON qualifiers, Raw names killer squad for Super Eagles. Ronaldo backs UEFA award for ULC all-time scoring record. Details can be found at the back page. The big story on the paper, Osimhen accepts €350,000 weekly pay offer by Chelsea. Details can be found on page 6. Ramos heads to Saudi League. Details at the back page. Done deal, Lukaku joins Napoli to make debut tomorrow. Wobbly signs cheaper United contract. Details can be found on page 6. FIBA women's ranking. Nigeria makes history, breaks into top 10. 96,000 pounds for Joshua and Du Bois belt. Details can be found at the back page. Injured Messi returns to training. My last mission at Anfield, coming from Mo Salah. You can find details on page 6. Mbappe's Twitter account hacked. Details at the back page. And that's all the news on Sporting Sun newspaper.
On Business Day newspaper, Nigeria among U.S. green card top 20. You can read detail of that. As well, still on Business Day newspaper, Nigerians Olympic flop cost athletes endorsement and sponsorship. More detail found in the paper. Still the countdown to Port Harcourt refinery opening, 2 days to go. Umahi rams through lawsuit in push for Lagos-Calabar highway. As well, coming from Ajero, how Falana and others prevented workers clash with police. You can do well to read that on page 2. And that's all in Business Day newspaper.
On Punch Sport Extra, Nigerian athletes falter at under 20 world champs. Paralympics, Nigeria starts fairly with table tennis and badminton. Lukman returns for inter-clash today. AFCON qualifiers, Raw names Benin squad for Eagles clash. Osimhen reaches agreement with Chelsea. Salah coy over Liverpool deal. Details can be found on page 4. The big story, Temi Tope Adesina exclusive. Olympics taught me not to wait for anybody. You just have to do what you need to do because eventually nobody celebrates failure. My Badagry to Paris story. You can read more on page 6. Joshua will decide the boys, but this is a statement from Okoli. I told Pogba not to join United. Ever I saying we have Juvie plot higher Sancho bid. Racial abuse, Madrid players to walk off pitch. Djokovic set men's single record. Ex-Nigerian star rally support for Libadia. Details can be found on page 7. And that's all the news on Punch Sports Extra.
But again, we can go for the program this morning. Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome, Sarah.
Thank you to our viewers, our supporters. Thank you to the entire crew for making Need and Actually making this program to be a success. We look forward again to doing this next week. Do have a blessed weekend ahead.